Brendan Dassey trial transcript day 6, continuing on page 40, testimony, cross-examination of investigator Mark Wiegert. Okay, I'll grant you that. I think you're a little more sophisticated and intelligent than Brendan. I would hope so. Do you think so? Not what you hope. I think so. Yeah, I think so. So is Fossbender, isn't he? I think so. In fact, he's been at this lot long, about twice as long as you have, hasn't he? That's correct, yes. Just as the number of gunshots that you discussed with Brendan changed throughout the course of this contact, it is correct, is it not, that the times changed when talking about events, particularly when he gets home, when he goes over by Steve, right? Yes, not surprisingly they do. Isn't it true, Detective, during the course of your contact on the 1st, that Brendan's told you flat out he was guessing at some of the questions that were asked of him? You'd have to be more specific, I don't know. I'm sure he may have said that once or twice, but, for example, the knife. To page 645? Sure, okay. You asked him, now, quarter of the way down, what about the knife? Where is the knife? Be honest with me, where's the knife, right? Yes. Okay, his answer, probably in the drawer. That's what he says. Okay, and you asked which drawer, right? Right. If you would, just kind of read yourself the rest of that on that page. Attorney Fallon, I'm sorry, counsel, what page was that again? Attorney Edelstein, 645. Attorney Fallon, thank you. The witness, yeah, I'm ready. By Attorney Edelstein, is it fair to say that even you concluded that he has no idea what happened to this knife? That's true because he says, I think it is, indicating he's really not sure where it went. So the insertion of the simple word think indicates to you that in and of itself is not a complete affirmation of what's being said. Do I understand you correctly? I'm saying is that he says, I think. That's where I think it is. And I take that to mean he's not really sure where it might be. So when he told you, for example, that he thought it was 2 shots, 3 shots, 10 shots, are you then adopting the same interpretation that you're not even certain that he has any certainty to that answer? I'm thinking he knows she was shot, but he probably doesn't recall the exact number of times. That's the way I took it, which is not surprising. When Brendan said things that you did not believe to be true, is it fair to say that you attempted him to correct his response? Yes, and several times he would resist that. Well, when you say resist, you're certainly not telling this jury that the mere fact that he did not change an answer, that you have any independent method to prove that his answer was false. It shows that he's not very suggestible to answers, that he answers what he knows. That's what it shows. Now, you're not an expert on suggestibility by any means, are you? You are correct, I'm not. All right, but you conceded earlier that he did change his answers many times? Yes, he did. But when you say he resists, let's go back to the hair. I guess you would conclude that he clearly told you that he cut the hair, right? True. You asked him where the hair went? True. Okay, supposedly on what he described as the counter, later determined to be the nightstand or something in Steve's room, right? No, I believe what he said is on the dresser. He told you a counter. You asked him, then he clarified that it was the dresser, correct? I recall him saying dresser. If he said counter first, I'll go along with that. Whatever, we're talking about the back bedroom? That is correct. He told you that, right? Yes. You had nothing you found no hairs of Teresa in the trailer, true or false? We don't know, so I'd have to, well, say false. What do you mean you don't know? You're the lead investigator. My question is this simple. Did you find any hairs of Teresa Halbach in the trailer of Stephen Avery? We don't know. You looked, didn't you? We recovered a lot of hair. Well, did you not ask somebody to check it to see whose it was? It's not that simple. You're not an expert on hair comparison, are you? You're right, I'm not. You had, at any given time, what was the maximum number of people out there on the Avery property helping you with this case? Any given time, it could range from 15 to over 100. And not only that, you have the resources of the State Crime Lab, right? Yes, we did. You had troopers out there helping us search, that is correct. You had volunteers. We had volunteer firefighters helping us go through the salvage yard. With all of these resources, there's some reason that you did not, let me make sure I'm clear. Did you ever ask anybody involved in the forensic world to compare hairs found at Stephen Avery's trailer with known samples from Teresa? There were general discussions revolving, did you or didn't you? That's a simple question, yes or no. There were, I'm just asking you the same way you asked Brendan many times, yes or no. There were general discussions, yes. Did you ask? So the answer, is the answer yes? Did you ask somebody to do a comparison? We had a general discussions about hair. Specific, did I ask somebody specifically to do a comparison? No. And you agree that you could have done that, couldn't you? No, I don't. All right, you were lead investigator, co-lead investigator, right? Yes, sir. What stopped you from asking either the Wisconsin State Crime Lab or another lab from doing a hair comparison? Well, if you'd like me, I'll explain the whole thing about hair, if that's what you'd like. I don't want to know your spin on the value of doing the comparisons. I just want to know why you didn't ask somebody to do it. Attorney Fallon, well, then he's now entitled to answer that question. The court, I think he is, counsel. I think you may characterize it editorially as a spin, but you've asked him, so go ahead and answer it. The witness, thank you. Attorney Edelstein, why didn't you do it? Thank you. Hair evidence, first of all, we took a carpet cleaner, which you've all seen. There's a vacuum cleaner that was taken as well, okay? There's probably thousands and thousands and thousands of hairs, both in there and in the vacuum cleaner. Number one. Number two, we had to prioritize things on this case. It was a huge case. One of the biggest submissions of evidence ever done to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. Had we had somebody look through every piece of hair that we found, they'd still be doing it today and probably still be doing it 2 years from now. The crime lab has only so many people, which you all know, which you've all seen. We took the evidence that we thought best would solve this crime and bring the murderer of Teresa Halbach to justice, and that's what we did. Could we have spent 2, 3, 4 years going through every hair? Absolutely. Is it feasible? It's not feasible. And if he's going to talk to me about DNA, which he's probably going to, on hair, almost impossible unless you have a root. He never pulled the hair out. He said he cut it. Thus, there's no root there. So there's a lot of reasons we didn't do hair analysis. Not to mention the crime lab does very limited hair analysis anymore to begin with. DNA, absolutely if you have the root. Even if you have the root of that hair and it went through that cleaner, you have to have skin follicles on that root. The odds of having skin follicles on the root of that hair when it goes through a cleaner like that are probably slim to none. Could we have done it in the next couple years? Certainly. That's the reason. So as a matter of prioritizing things, one of the reasons, could have been done. You just chose not to, correct? I'll go with you, sure. All right. Okay, Detective, let me ask you this. Going back to the interview again. Initially, I believe Brendan said that he saw Teresa up on the porch talking with Steve, right? True. Okay, and then at some point in time, he was confronted, and Fossbender, and I'm sorry, I can't find a page, but if you have an independent memory, maybe do it this way. Fossbender told him that, quote, you couldn't have seen Teresa on the porch, right? Very true. Okay, and then Brendan agreed with that and said, no, I didn't, right? Correct, because Brendan didn't see her there. And that's another example of times that he changed based upon either a leading question or a negative response from one of you guys, right? Because Brendan knew he was caught in a lie. Exactly. Well, you don't know what Brendan knew, did you? Come on. Brendan knew it wasn't true. She wasn't there on the porch at that time. We know that. You have the ability to sit here and purport to tell this jury that you have the ability to know what he knows. I know Teresa wasn't there on the porch at that time, so he couldn't have seen her. You're not a mind reader, are you? She wasn't on the porch. Are you a mind reader? Do you have that ability? I'm not a mind reader. Attorney Edelstein, that's all. The court, redirect? Attorney Fallon, yes, thank you. Redirect examination by Attorney Fallon. Let's start with guns. Were any bolt action or lever action .22 caliber weapons seized from Stephen Avery's trailer? No. All right. During your questioning of the defendant, did it appear to you that he had sufficient, or no, did it appear to you that he really knew much about guns? No, matter of fact, he had talked about being afraid to shoot a cat or watch somebody shoot a cat for fear he had hardly any knowledge of guns. All right, now counsel asked you, I'm going to switch now to the SUV and this blood spatter question. You were asked a question on cross-examination about wouldn't you expect blood spatter in the SUV if a stabbing, for instance, had occurred there? And you said you would not. Tell us why. That's correct. When somebody's stabbed, there isn't this great amount of blood that goes flying out of a stab wound. Anybody that's in the medical field has knowledge of that. When you talk about blood spatter, it usually comes from something higher velocity. Stabbing a knife into somebody isn't going to cause all this blood to go anywhere. When you stab somebody in the area, from my limited medical knowledge, where is it he says he stabbed her? It's in the cavity. Even free bleeding, it's going to bleed into that cavity. It's pretty simple. There isn't going to be this big pool spatter, a big blood spatter. It's not going to happen. All right, so there's a difference between spatter and pooling of blood, for instance. Yes, sir. All right, and just so that we're clear, we didn't see any pooling in the center of that cargo area upon forensic examination. No, I wouldn't expect it to. All right, now did you learn that there were that it was at least 2 gunshot wounds to the head at the same time? Did you learn about both gunshot findings at the same time? No, actually, we had learned about the first gunshot wound. I believe it was around November. Correction, let me go back. I believe it was around February 27. We learned much later than that, and I believe it was after this interview, about the second gunshot wound that they found. So no, we did not know there were 2 suspected entrance wounds. At least 2? 2 that we know of. Again, we don't have all of the skull. Okay, I just have a couple of final questions. The defendant was at the sheriff's department for quite a while, but in terms of the actual interview of the defendant, how much interview time are we talking about here? 2 hours, and I believe it's 53 minutes outside of breaks, when we got him water, when we got him sodas, when we got him a sandwich, when we offered him to go to the bathroom. Outside of those breaks, there was about 2 hours, just under 3 hours. Of questioning? Of questioning. All right. Yes. Now, yesterday, when we ended, counsel asked you about the absence of DNA and fingerprints that connect the defendant to the crime. Do you recall that? I do. All right. Now, although there is no DNA profile of the defendant or his fingerprints, is there scientific evidence that connects him to this crime, in your opinion? Absolutely. Let's take that in 2 parts. After receiving the statement that we witnessed yesterday, what did you do? After receiving the statement, which you guys all saw yesterday on March 1, we applied and obtained a search warrant, which was signed by a judge. We entered that garage, did a full search of that garage. As you already know, we found 2 bullet fragments in that garage. Number 1 bullet fragment that we found underneath that air compressor, which you all saw, we retrieved, we sent it to the lab, and we found Teresa Halbach's DNA on that bullet that we discovered after Mr. Dassey told us she was shot in the garage. That very bullet was analyzed by the weapons specialist, which you heard talk here. That bullet came from the .22 hanging in Steve Avery's bedroom, which Brendan told us. Brendan told us where we'd find that .22, and that's where we found it. To the exclusion of all other guns, that's where that bullet came from. That's information that Mr. Dassey told us during this interview that we did not know. All right, and while you were interviewing him, did you have a fair command of the forensic evidence that you knew and that existed prior to this statement? Yes, sir. All right, and in terms of the evidence that was known to you at the time of the interview, what scientific evidence do you believe corroborates many of the details he provided? There's a lot of it. I'll give you a few examples. The bleach, for example, corroborates what he says about cleaning up in the garage. We find the bleach bottle where he says we'd find the bleach bottle. The bleach bottle's empty. The rake and the shovel, which he says they took out of the garage to help tend the fire. Where did we find the rake and shovel? Out by the fire. His pants, he's the one who tells us that there's bleach stains on the pants from cleaning up blood in the garage. He turns over the pants. You saw for yourself what's on the pants. He indicated that there were restraints used. He's the one who told us they were handcuffs. We find handcuffs. He tells us they put Teresa after they killed her in the back of her own vehicle. We find Teresa's DNA, blood, in the back of that vehicle. He tells us that Steve's got a cut on his finger. We find Steve's blood in Teresa's truck. Just a few examples. Thank you. Attorney Fallon, no further questions.